everything chat, community or society, disaster risk reduction strategies and management. Welcome to the Risk Management of Everything channel. On this channel, community or society, which involve widespread human, material, economic or environmental community or society to cope using its own resources. Disaster management is how we deal with the human, material, economic or environmental impacts of a said disaster. It is the process of how we prepare for, respond to and learn from the effects of major failures. Though often caused by nature, disasters can have human origins. According to the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, a disaster occurs when a hazard impacts vulnerable people. The combination of hazards, vulnerability and inability to reduce the potential negative consequences of risk results in disaster. Disaster management is strategic planning and procedure that is administered and employed to protect critical infrastructures, also known as critical assets, from severe damages when natural or human-made calamities and catastrophic events occur. Disaster management plans are multi-layered and are aimed to address such issues as floods, hurricanes, fires, bombings, and even mass failures of utilities or the rapid spread of disease. The disaster plan is likely to address such important matters as relinquishing people from an impacted region, arranging temporary housing, food, and medical care. Disasters can be either natural or human-made events and can include pandemics, technological disasters, or environmental cataclysms. When a hazard event, such as a drought, flood, cyclone, earthquake or tsunami, occurs, triggering the loss of life and damage to infrastructure, it highlights the reality that society and its assets are vulnerable to such events. When discussing disaster risk management, a disaster can highlight the geographical area where the community is settled is exposed to such a hazard. The systems and its infrastructure, assets and other processes, as well as services that may have experienced damage or destruction, are vulnerable. One of the biggest challenges of disaster management is the need to be prepared for a wide range of contingencies. A good place to begin a discussion of disaster management is by considering what constitutes a disaster. There are four main types of disaster: natural disasters, man-made disasters, complex emergencies, and pandemic emergencies. Now, let us discuss types of disaster. 1. Natural disasters. According to the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, natural disasters are naturally occurring physical phenomena caused either by rapid or slow onset events that have immediate impacts on human health and secondary impacts causing further death and suffering. These disasters include floods, hurricanes, earthquakes and volcano eruptions that can have immediate impacts on human health, as well as secondary impacts causing further death and suffering from floods causing landslides, earthquakes resulting in fires, tsunamis causing widespread flooding, and typhoons sinking ferries. The United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction characterizes natural disasters in relation to 1. Their magnitude or intensity, 2. Speed of onset, 3. Duration, and 4. Area of extent. For instance, earthquakes by its location, intensity or magnitude, frequency, and probability. Exposure. Exposure may be described as the situation of people, infrastructure, housing, production capacities, and other tangible human assets located in hazard-prone areas. Consequently, exposure refers to people, property, systems, or elements present in hazard zones that are thereby subject to potential losses. Measures of exposure can increase to any particular hazard to estimate the economic and environmental factors or processes which increase the susceptibility of an individual, a community, assets or systems to the impacts of hazards. Vulnerability is multidimensional in its nature, and next to the 4 dimensions and governance, for example including corruption, etc. For example, when a settlement is established on the shores of a river, hydrologists can identify and characterize flood hazard by carrying out a hydraulic analysis. According to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, under definition, a hazard is characterized by its location, intensity or magnitude, frequency and probability. In some countries, such as during and after a crisis, Phases of disaster management are known as disaster management cycle phases. Here are the 4 phases of disaster management that take place in 4 key phases: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Here is a figure showing that the 4 phases of disaster management. All organizations are in at least one phase at any given moment in time. Understanding these 4 phases will empower your organization to prepare for and respond to crises in a smarter, more informed way. Making the right decisions will give your organization the best chance of survival and recovery following an unanticipated event. Let us take a closer look at what each of the disaster management phases means. Phase 1, mitigation. Meaning, to prevent future impacts, such as property damage, injuries and loss of life. Examples of the most notable example of the response phase is to ensure that people are out of harm's way. The organization will then place after a disaster. This phase can last anywhere from 6 months to a year, or even longer depending on the understanding and measure out decisions and choices, including a lack of some risk information has a role in 5 key areas of decision making. 1. Because the potential damages and losses that could arise used to inform a broad range of activities to reduce risk, from risks to different geographic area affected, along with the intensity and frequency of different hazard events, is critical for planning evacuation events. A potential risk assessment can play a critical role in impact modeling before an event strikes. In the days leading
सुनकर देखो सुनकर देखो सुनकर देखो जी, ममता राहुल मोदी बोले, लिखे जितेंद्र जी।